So the Supreme Court ruling Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will stay on the ballot in Michigan and Wisconsin, even though he was fighting to get off of those two ballots. And they are, of course, crucial battleground states. He suspended his campaign and is now backing former President Trump. But look at this. RFK Jr. gets 3% among likely voters in Michigan in this new poll, and 1% of the Wisconsin voters. Both of these polls are new from CNN. Now, RFK Jr. says he wants his supporters to vote for President Trump and not for him. But will they or won't they? Let's bring in Hugh Hewitt, nationally syndicated radio show host, and Juan Williams, Fox News senior political analyst. Hugh, you know, when you look at the third-party effect in Wisconsin in 2016 and 2020, and you see how slim the margin of victory was in 16, let's put these up. In 16, Trump won by less than 1%. Gary Johnson was at 3.5%. And in 2020, Biden won by less than 1%. And Jorgensen took 1% of that vote. Is there an RFK factor in Wisconsin, and we can show the Michigan numbers as well, that concerns you as someone who I know has said on your show you believe that Trump will win?
I think Trump's going to win, and I'm not concerned about the RFK vote. I think most of that remaining 3% are disaffected Democrats. And I also believe the CNN polls, gosh, I love CNN, but they are outliers when you line them up against every other state poll that I have seen in the last week. I think something is amiss with their sample. I think he's going to win, and I've said this again and again, because not only is he ahead in those states in some polls, in Wisconsin, he's got Eric Hovde. In Pennsylvania, he's got Dave McCormick. And in Michigan, he's got Mike Rogers. There is a great double effect in all three states.
Juan, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that what we know, as the chart you just put up showed, Martha, is that these third-party candidates can have some effect. And among the Harris supporters, I think there's been from the start concern about RFK Jr. and Jill Stein. And in fact, the Harris camp has ads out in which you see Jill Stein transform into Donald Trump. But right now, I think that RFK is telling you something when he says that he wants his supporters to vote for Donald Trump, because he knows that he would be taking votes away from Trump.
Yeah, we looked to see if there are ads up in Michigan, you know, of RFK Jr. telling his supporters that. We didn't see any. That doesn't mean they don't exist. But I'd like to know what that effort looks like, if indeed it's out there.
Can they meet their key?
Oh, all right. Let's take a look at this soundbite from today in Madison. Watch.
They want me on the ballot to trick people into voting for me instead of voting for President Trump. And what I'm saying to you is, do not fall for that ploy. I don't want your vote. I want you to vote for Donald Trump. Everybody's got to vote.
I mean, it's an interesting situation. He fought to get on the ballot, and now he is fighting to get off the ballot and to convince people that he is a supporter of Trump and that they shouldn't waste their vote voting for him. We'll see if that works. The gender gap, let's put up presidential preference between men and women. You have men at 41 for Harris, men at 55 for Trump, 54 for Harris with women, and 42 for Trump, almost mirror images of each other. Hugh, there are more women who vote than men. Is that going to be the story of this election, do you think?
No, again, I think you can find some polls that show the gender gap for men is much larger than the gender gap for women. And those are more recent polls and, of course, doesn't account for the Rogan effect and the vice president's rather horrible week of press interviews, which continued on Club Shay Shay and other places. Here's what I think about polling. We can find whatever we want, a story we want to write. We can find it in some set of data. What matters to me is inflation. It's 20%. And the key poll, right direction, wrong direction. The best poll for Kamala Harris is that 62% of the country thinks we're going in the wrong direction. That's the best poll. There's never been an incumbent party that won with that kind of a number.
Here's Nikki Haley with Bret Baier on Tuesday night talking about this. Let's watch.
This is not a time for them to get overly masculine with this bromance thing that they've got going. 53% of the electorate are women. Women will vote. They care about how they're being talked to, and they care about the issues. They need to remember that. This is a time of discipline, and this is a time of addition.
One quick thought on that before we go?
Sure, I think the gender gap is huge here, the biggest I've ever seen covering American politics, and women vote more than men. So the early vote, the abortion issue, and the kind of offensive remarks that were made at the Madison Square Garden rally, I think they say to women, hey, that's not your place, and that's what you're hearing from Nikki Haley. It's a shock to me, by the way, that Nikki Haley has not been asked to come campaign for the Trump team.
Yeah, she has not talked to them since June. She told Brett, and I'm going to turn this into a tease for my podcast with Hugh Hewitt, because we just spoke, and he has a theory on the women who he thinks have been outspoken for Trump, and he thinks their message is working. So tune in for that. Hugh Hewitt, thank you so much for your time earlier and now. And Juan,
Thanks,
always
Martha.
good to see you. Thank you.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.